Here we go. A national media member outlet predicted 11 wins for Ole Miss this fall. Let's talk about it. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national member and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we dive into Ross Dellinger's report that momentum is building for a 9-game SEC slate. What would that mean for the Ole Miss Rebels? We also go inside practice with some nuggets you can't miss, including what the future could look like for Jaylon Braxton. But first, ESPN's game-by-game predictions are out, and if they come true, Ole Miss is going 11-1 this season. We'll talk about it, compare it to last year, and break down why this could be one of the most special seasons in program history. We'll explain all of that and more on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast right after this. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is, and that is the most fun way to follow Ole Miss. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on the audio podcatcher that you're listening to, and give us a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it keeps all of this free. If you want more, though, you can join the Insiders program in the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest way ever to cancel. Please give it a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. And coming up in Ole Miss Trivia, the clue, it's Ole Miss season openers again. We're going to talk about that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is right around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Really interesting stuff. Last year, Ole Miss was favored in 11 of the 12 games, according to the ESPN FPI. The one that they weren't were the Georgia Bulldogs. They ended up winning that game, but they famously lost 3 games that they were the chalk favorite in. And this year, a similarity is happening for Ole Miss. If you look at what we predicted at Locked On Ole Miss, we predicted 10-2. And we're standing by that. We're putting it up on the screen all the time. Everybody can see that. August 30th, Georgia State coming up in about a week, starting off with 6 straight wins, losing 2 games on the road at Georgia and at Oklahoma. And then there's the South Carolina game, the Citadel game, the Florida game, and the Mississippi State game, all wins. Start out with 6 wins, close with 4 wins. That is how you get to 10-2. And what we think is going to happen is I like Ole Miss to be a little bit of a juggernaut at home. They're a different team under Lane Kiffin than they are on the road. That's the way they've been. The being able to have that home field advantage over the opponent, that is a big thing for Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin. They have struggled traditionally on the road, especially in big games. The Georgia game 2023 comes to mind, LSU and Florida in 2024, Alabama in 2021 and 2023. Lane Kiffin has struggled in big games on the road. So if you can get those toss-up games at home, you're in pretty good shape. So that's one of the reasons I think that Ole Miss has a real shot at hitting the number that ESPN is predicting, and that is going 8-0 in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium and handling business as much as they can on the road, getting a win at State, getting a win at Kentucky, and then splitting the Georgia and Oklahoma game, which honestly is probably more likely that Ole Miss beats Georgia and Athens, which Georgia hasn't lost there in 6 years, than it is winning the game against Oklahoma. And that's just because of the they're going to beat you twice phenomenon that comes with a Kirby Smart or Nick Saban coach team. Now, these are the ESPN FPIs. The green numbers are the consensus wins for Ole Miss. That's 65% or greater. 30 to 65% are in yellow, and the red one is under 30%. There's only one game that ESPN thinks is a surefire loss for Ole Miss. They have Ole Miss with a 26% chance to beat the Georgia Bulldogs. But Other than that, the lowest number on the screen is 56.3% at Oklahoma. Then it's 57.4% versus South Carolina. It's kind of funny that ESPN and the probability index thinks that South Carolina is the toughest SEC home game for Ole Miss and not LSU. LSU is at 57.7%. If you look at what's going on, there's no real toss-ups on there besides probably that Oklahoma game. The LSU game and the South Carolina game, yes, there's a chance that Ole Miss could lose those games, but the way it sits, that's 57 out of 100 games Ole Miss wins, 56 out of 100 games Ole Miss wins. That is how the probability is looked at. If you looked at the early part of the season, they think Ole Miss is going to start 6-0. They think they're going to close 5-0, and that's how they get to the 11-1. Georgia in the middle. But like I said, when it comes to the Georgia Bulldogs, it is probably more likely that Ole Miss beats Georgia than winning at Oklahoma just because of the fatigue of after the Georgia game. After Ole Miss played well against Georgia, they had a bye week, and they still allowed Georgia to win the second game whenever Florida was going up the following weekend. And that is interesting. But if you look at this, ESPN literally lays out a path that is more likely than not, according to their advanced metrics, of Ole Miss going 11-1. Now, games still have to be played. Nothing's set in stone. But when somebody tells you 7-5 is likely, when somebody tells you 6-6 is something that could happen, when somebody tells you that 9-3 is the best that Ole Miss could absolutely hope for, point to the ESPN FPI, the game predictor that has Ole Miss at 11-1, and tell them why this season won't be a surprise if Ole Miss shows out. If Ole Miss does what we expect, they have a good defense, they have an excellent front seven, they have plenty of skill weapons on the outside, they have a quarterback that could be dynamic. They have a better running back room. I think the offensive line is going to be better than it was a year ago. With all of that going on, there's the opportunity to have a really good season, a special season. One of those years that you talk about for the next 50 years is on the table for this season. If you look at the schedule that sets up, 5 out of the 6 first games are home games. Then at Georgia and at OU. Then 3 out of the last 4 games are home games. 9 games inside the state of Mississippi. 2 SEC road games against the 15th and 16th team in the Southeastern Conference. Can they beat you? Yeah, Kentucky won the game a year ago. They can absolutely do that. You have to play well. But if you play up to expectations and the way that you think this is going to go, Ole Miss has a chance to be a very successful team this season and beyond. I'm pretty fired up about where Ole Miss could be and how it looks going forward. But this is ESPN. This is ABC, Disney. This is the owner of the SEC rights saying that Ole Miss is going to beat OU. Ole Miss is going to beat South Carolina. Ole Miss is going to beat Florida, going to beat LSU. The worldwide leader is saying that, not me. These results are actually better than what we predicted, and that just justifies and confirms what we predicted to start with. Now, it's just about playing the games, being consistent, and winning football games. On a side note, we looked at yesterday's podcast and talked about what was going on. LSU at 57.7%, OU at 56.3%, South Carolina at 57.4%, Florida at 58.8%. Ole Miss is all favored to win those games, but it's close enough in the margins to where you have to do the things that make you win, not make you lose, not play the slot machine. If Ole Miss can do the things that need to be done, they are going to be a very, very tough out for absolutely everybody. And I, for one, am really excited about that and where it could go. Listen, camp is officially in the books, and Ole Miss has turned the page to game prep for Georgia State, but that doesn't mean the rumor mill has slowed down. Practice buzz is still circulating. It could have real implications for a couple of highly rated recruits who we're paying close attention to for early playing time amongst position battles. So what are we hearing, and what does it mean for the Ole Miss Rebels? We'll break all that down next. August 26th is officially FanDuel's Future Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on the NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling for your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ even before week one kicks off, this is your moment. I mean, this is all music to Locked On Ole Miss podcast ears. So let's take a flyer on the MVP race. I am personally all about Jaden Daniels putting up massive numbers for the Washington Commanders this year. You know, you can crown your champion in August. Yeah, I really like Buffalo. It might be the hard knocks going on right now, but I'm kind of a big Josh Allen guy. I don't know why, but I do. Or you can parlay a division winner dark horse like hello, New Orleans or Miami, right? Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet right now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. As practice turns to game week and Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels get ready for the Georgia State Panthers, there's still some practices going on. There's still some decisions that need to be made, especially the offensive line, but we're not going to jump off of that bridge on a Friday podcast. Enjoy your weekend. But we will talk about the football practice as a whole for a couple of players. I got a couple of notes sent to me. I wanted to relay that to everybody. And the first one is about Jaylon Braxton. We talked about him during camp. Maybe they wanted him at free safety. Apparently, he's back to working at cornerback as the Georgia State prep begins. They're hoping, I think, looking and reading the tea leaves, that a combination of Jaylon Braxton, Antonio Kite, and Ricky Fletcher and Chris Graves, all there becomes a nice triumvirate developing of those three. I think one of these players could absolutely end up in the John Saunders role, but Jaylon Braxton moving back to corner, that is interesting. And with, like I said, Ricky Fletcher, 6'3", 200 pounds, a huge wingspan that he has. I think Ricky Fletcher is going to be the replacement for Trey Amos, honestly. The other side, though, is Antonio Kite and Jaylon Braxton now, and Chris Graves is working out as well, and they're trying to find the top as it goes. Jaylon Braxton, though, moving back to cornerback and potentially eyeing a starting role as the Georgia State game gets kicked off. Now, the next thing we've heard is pretty interesting. A couple of young guys here. Shekai Mills Knight, the running back out of Chattanooga, the Baylor school, he is finally really flashing at pass protection, which is a hiccup spot for running backs coming out of high school and going into college. Pass pro is of the utmost importance. I was told when he gets his line right, when he gets his path right for pass protection, he is really good at it. And he's somebody that you can absolutely count on. And we talked about this going back to the Navy All-American game, to where the coach in that game was putting Shekai Mills Knight in on obvious passing downs so he can pass pro. The pass pro is in the bag of tricks. And now that it's kind of flashing at the college level, this is a name that we need to start looking out for, somebody that could play in the near future. Pass pro is always the thing that holds people back. Kejuan Lacey has gotten better, a lot better at pass pro, and it feels like they said he's starting to get it in pass pro. Shekai Mills Knight getting it, more depth comes to that room, and they're going to be better players because of it, if that makes sense at all. I hope I said that correctly. The last one is Caleb Cunningham, the former number one player in the state of Mississippi. He's running with the 2s and 7-on-7s, so that means he's surging in practice. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play. We don't know what the load management was. We don't know who was out of that particular practice. But Caleb Cunningham moving up the depth chart, we all know what type of talent he has offensively. He has the ability to really spark. And Caleb Cunningham, it looks like he is starting to get it. Still has a little bit ways to go, but it looks like he is starting to get it and put it together. Now, if you remember the first teamers of this wide receiver unit, you have potentially Deshaun Stribling, you have Caden Lee, you have Harrison Wallace III. That's kind of the leaders in the clubhouse of the wide receiver. And it's amazing that we've talked as little as we've had about leaders like that. The second group of wide receivers that everybody talks about, Winston Watkins is not even in that list, but you have Deuce Alexander, Traylon Ray, and Isaiah Hartrop. And then you have the freshman after that, Winnie Watkins. You have Dylan Alford, who has had a really good fall at Ole Miss. And then you have Caleb Cunningham, who looks like he's coming up. I just named 9 players that can play wide receiver at Ole Miss. I just named a 3 deep. However it ends up after the Georgia State game, we need to keep an eye on that, because 9 players that are functioning really well on the football team right now. Now, this is all good news for Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons is a guy that he needs the weapons. He's a young quarterback. Young quarterbacks are going to have ups. They're going to have downs. They're going to be a little bit more inconsistent. It's not going to be Jackson Dart of 2024, but I think it's going to be better than Jackson Dart of 2022, especially if the running game progresses like we expect it to. We mentioned a couple of shows ago that Kewan Lacey, sources said he's pretty much obviously the starter. I got in my comments below and somebody was talking about by the end of the year, I expect Logan Diggs to make a push for a lot of playing time. And somebody else came in and said, Damian Taylor is likely the wildcat running back for this Ole Miss offense, the short yardage back. That means there's a 3-back rotation. We've talked about this for the better part of 6 or 7 months about how it just feels like Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin, they're going to go back to a 3 running back group like they had with Jerry and Ely, Snoop Connor, and Henry Parrish back in 2020 and 2021. If Ole Miss can replicate what they did offensively, this is going to be a very good offense, and Austin Simmons is going to be able to settle in. Do not underestimate Austin Simmons. Have 5 out of the 6 games at home. That is an absolute major thing. 5 out of the first 6 games at home before you go to Georgia. Now, Kentucky can get a little bit loud. It's an SEC game, the whole 9 yards there, but it's not Athens, Georgia. Athens will be a wake-up call for Austin Simmons, and they are going to be extremely up to play that game. But these young players making a push in fall practice, that's worth keeping an eye on. And Jaylon Braxton moving to cornerback, that is also worth keeping an eye on. When we come back in our final segment, the SEC's on-again, off-again saga with 9 conference games scheduled feels like Ross and Rachel for Friends all over again. It's exhausting. But the good news, we are getting close to an answer on college football's most tired question. We tell you all about it next. That and Ole Miss trivia right after we come back. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Heck, maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet up with Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours. You can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rougiette connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. You can even read real customer reviews on their site, and it's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege, all one word, to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege, all one word, for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but they are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rougiet's website for full safety information. If anybody watched Friends back in the day, one of the most exhausting storylines in the entire show was the Ross and Rachel thing. Will they or won't they? They do the rom-com thing for about 8 years, it seemed like, until a dramatic conclusion to where they rush to the airport and they all live happily ever after. That airport is how you got the answer to a question that was going on as long as the show. But the SEC has their very own Ross and Rachel thing, and that is 9 SEC conference games. Now, I'm not here to get into the argument of whether or not 9 games are better or worse versus the Big Ten going forward. I'm here to get in on this, that 9 SEC games is better for the fan. The fan would much rather watch Ole Miss play another conference game than Ole Miss play Georgia State or Georgia Southern or somebody from the Sun Belt, ULM or Louisiana Lafayette or something like that. So this is a good thing if it goes to 9 games from the fan. It is not a good thing if you're just trying to make a bowl game and you need 6 wins. If you need 6 wins, that means that your program essentially is mid, and you're needing all the help you can get to play in a bowl game because that makes your fan base happy of what's going on. I would like to think Ole Miss has gotten past that. I would like to think that Ole Miss is aware of what's going on and they will take on all comers. Ole Miss has the 3rd most wins over the last 3 years or 4 years or something like that in the SEC behind Alabama and Georgia. The only thing lacking in the Ole Miss resume in the Ole Miss quiver is a big game win. They beat Georgia, and it's starting to come, but Ole Miss needs to get to the point where they're doing that consistently. Lane Kiffin is one of the best roster builders in all of college football. He does that extremely well and yet gets no credit for it. Everybody wants to talk about big games with Lane Kiffin and not the fact that Ole Miss is winning 10 games in 3 of the last 4 years when they've done it once in the last 50. Lane Kiffin doesn't get credit for that. He only gets blamed for the other stuff, and I understand that. And the bleeds it leads journalism, that's the way it works from time to time. But the SEC going to 9 games would ultimately be a benefit for the fans. So this is from Ross Dellinger from, I think it's on 3 now. Might be Yahoo. I'm not 100% sure. Listen, I'm one of those people that doesn't care who tells me something. I care what they tell me, and who tells me, it goes in one ear and out the other almost as soon as I hear it. But this is Ross Dellinger. And momentum for the 9-game SEC schedule grew this spring, coinciding with the emergence of the 4-4-2-2-1 college football format, which I am in favor of, by the way. But it seemed to fade after coaches rejected the format. The coaches want to do the performative thing in front of that. If no coaches went in front of the media, it would have gone through and everything would have been good. However, combined with added ESPN money, because that's the key, if TV is going to pay, to potentially ease college football playoff talks, and SEC leaders are inching closer to adopting 9 games. If you look at the future schedule, Ole Miss doesn't have more than 2 non-conference opponents scheduled for 2026 and beyond. This has been planned. They're planning for this 9-game conference schedule, and I think they're going to plan for the Big Ten format of how the 16-team playoff happens. There's going to be posturing, things is going on in public. But when you look behind the scenes and seeing the SEC, they've eliminated every non-conference game but 2 every single year. It feels like something is up, and maybe the SEC and the Big Ten are kind of playing black hat and white hat, but in the end, they've already decided how this is going to be, and they're just playing out the public relations as we see right now. In meetings this week, the SEC executives move closer to adopting a 9-game conference football schedule. Sources tell Yahoo Sports a decision remains with the presidents, who are expected to meet soon on the issue. This could happen very quickly, and once it does, I imagine there's going to be some sort of a schedule release as well, as the SEC tries to make money on that. According to the previous modeling of the 9-game conference schedule, a debate the league has held for 4 years, each school would play 3 permanent opponents and 6 rotating opponents. We'll explain that in just a second. And finally, if the SEC decides to move to 9-game schedule, ACC leaders have said they would likely follow suit, a move that puts all 4 power conferences at 9-game league schedules. This may be expedited discussions around future college football formats. You might be doing this as a part of their agreement. Maybe they agree to the 5-11 thing. For the SEC has to go to 9 games. You put you at a little bit of a disadvantage. You can go to 9. Now, really important stuff to think of. The 3 permanent opponents that are rumored for Ole Miss is Mississippi State, LSU, and Arkansas. Those are the teams that you would play every single year, and you would rotate the other 6 and play everybody every other year. So in a 4-game period, and this all works out really well, a player that comes to your school in 4 years would play in every conference field in the conference. So at Texas, at home against Texas, at Oklahoma, at home against Oklahoma, everything would happen throughout the conference with 6 and 6. So we'll see how it looks and where the playoff goes from here. Now that the media speculation is distracted, they can make some decisions about what's going on there. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Listen, today in Ole Miss Trivia, we are talking about season openers from 1997. In 1997, they closed the season against Chad Pennington and Randy Moss and the Marshall Thundering Herd. But what was the name of the quarterback that Ole Miss opened the season against? It was their first ever overtime win, 24-23 against the Central Florida Golden Knights, who since have demanded that they be called the UCF Knights, but who was the Central Florida Golden Knights in 1997. Who was the quarterback that pushed Ole Miss to overtime to start that season? Answer in the comments down below. We'll put the answer out on social media a little bit later on today. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the front door of Ole Miss. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's absolutely free. Your support means the world to us. Your second listen, check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everybody, and remember, analytics is just the old English word meaning bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.